Again, welcome. I'm Barbara Honig. I'm a board member of 40 Plus. And for the past 15 years, I've been consulting to CVS Health on mature workers and workforce initiatives. And I'm going to be moderating this discussion on career transitions. And we have actually four amazing, well, we'll have a fourth one here soon, amazing panelists who've made many, many successful career transitions. And they're going to address the challenges and opportunities that they've, as they've carved out work for themselves. And you're going to find out, what motivated each one to pivot and how they built resiliency and made those changes. And I'm going to be introducing them to you shortly. There are, certainly as you all know, many circumstances why people want to make a change. It could be, you want to pursue a passion, you feel burned out, you want to do something more fulfilling, or something completely different. 15 years ago, I made the quantum leap from the nonprofit world, AARP, Justice and Aging, NCOA, and Jewish Federations in North America, to CVS Health, where I focus on mature workers and workforce initiatives. And what I do there really is build strategic partnerships with national and community-based organizations, academic organizations, national and policymakers. During the job search mode that I had in 2004, I asked a colleague from the business world just to take a look at my resume and tell me what message I was sending out. And Steve Wing said, resume looked okay. And then he invited me to join the team at CVS Health. And I said, well, what would I be doing? And he said, well, you'll figure it out. Well, and then he said to me, Barbara, we don't have anybody on the team who knows aging. Is that the conversation nationally? Because that's generally what I was doing. And who has, as he said, the fat Rolodex that you have. And quite frankly, it's really been the best job that I've ever had. I serve on the Business Advisory Council for the National Hispanic Council on Aging, Jewish Council on Aging, the American Society on Aging Board Leadership Council, the Sloan Center on Aging and Work and beyond. It's really all with the CVS hat. And now what I'd like to tell you is the kind of format we're going to follow. I will introduce all four of our panelists who will then tell you their story. I'll pose some questions to them, either individually or as a group. And then we'll, open it up for Q&A. First, we're going to start with my good friend, Rob Henderson, who is the Assistant Director of the Office of Grants Development at Northern Virginia Community College. He's a member of the 40 Plus board. He's and correct me if I don't catch everything, he's a published author. He's an advocate for civil and political liberty. He's a strategic planner, a grants developer, a manager and writer. And he's had experience in the U.S. government, the UN, senior nonprofit leadership, and as I understand it, from what you sent me, you've been in 44 countries?
I've worked in 44.
Worked in 44 countries. Wow. Okay, our second speaker is my good friend Orlene Grant. And Orlene is the president and founder of the Juanita C. Grant Foundation. And her career has segued significantly for healthcare to government, from healthcare to government to for-profit to philanthropy. And she's going to speak on the pivotal moments that triggered her transitions and what made it work. Then we have Dave O'Neill. He's going to be our third speaker. And he is in as he claims, an encore career as a retirement consultant with a group called Loving Your Retirement. And he's a wealth manager with Heritage Financial. And he retired from the law field where he was an assistant general counsel with Verizon. And now we have my good friend John Wilhelm. Welcome. And he's had a very interesting career with several transitions. He started his professional career at Arthur Andersen. He's a licensed CPA in Virginia, and he spent the majority of his career developing tax software, which I haven't the vaguest idea of what that is, but you're going to learn more about that. And following a corporate reorganization, he found himself in a career transition. He took the 40-plus career transition skill training course that we've been talking about earlier, and is currently a field agent for the Knights of Columbus, where he advises members on insurance matters. And he also holds a very important position as an executive director of 40 Plus, which is a very important volunteer position. And thank you. Okay, Rob is going, now that you've heard a bit about everybody, Rob, why don't you kick it off and start?
Sure.
Thanks
Thanks very much, Barbara. Thanks everyone for coming, and it's good to see you here, and even to link in with some of you. Barbara asked me a series of questions about how to approach this, and the best I could come up with is that I've had 3 career transitions, and that included 7 discrete jobs. So here's the way I break it out. Foreign affairs from 1977 to 1994, all right? Nonprofits, primarily education nonprofits, 1994 to 2007, and then higher education, 2007 to the present. The job transitions are a little tougher, to categorize, but it goes like this: Department of Defense, Center for Strategic and International Studies, State Department, International Republican Institute of the National Endowment for Democracy, and UNDP. That's from 1977 to 1994. All right? Nonprofits, Institute of International Education, the Washington Center for Internships and Academic Seminars.
I did work for them.
Did you really? Cool.
I worked for IIE.
Did you really?
Yeah, another life.
There we go.
And I
So-
work with them sometimes.
Oh, there you go.
I've never worked with them at all.
That's a cool. Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress, and then Executive Director of 40 Plus at one point. And then higher education, and that's from 2007 to the present, and that's from the Northern Virginia Community College. What are my specialties? What do I do? Why am I talking to you tonight? Because I'm a grant writer, I'm a grant manager, I'm a program manager, and I am a transition specialist for institutions. I help institutions grow and change. But in order to do that, you need resources. And that's what I try to do with the board on 40 Plus. And so I always say the same thing. We got to suit up, we got to show up, and we got to pay up, right? Okay, very good.
I like that last one.
The lessons. The lessons are basically 4, but they could be 7, but I'll just leave it at 4. Finding a job when you have a job is always easier. Punto final, okay? Leave it at that. Don't mess around. If you're thinking about a transition, there's some other things that we need to talk about, but having that employment in your hand and then being able to seek, it makes the whole operation a lot better. I have fallen into that sump where we're jobless and looking and having doubts, and the doubts are increasing. And one of my good friends that Dave and Eric know, John Bird told me, go find something, bring in some income, help others, and sure enough, of course, as soon as I did that, it kicked off and it got better right away. Lesson 2, expect income fluctuations and status fluctuations. You'll be hired based on your qualifications and their needs, not on your wants. Get over it. Changing careers is a lot more expensive than transitioning within careers. Okay? I've done it 3 times, I'll tell you. From IIE, looking backwards to UNDP, I started working at IIE for 1/3 of the salary I was making at UNDP. Thank you very much. Yes. Deep cleansing breath. When I started working at Nova, it was better. I was making 3/4 of the salary that I was making at CS, at the Center for the Senate Presidency of Congress. Staying in place pays. Staying in place pays. Now, I'm not trying to, be a font of wisdom or anything, but I'm going to just give it to you straight. In the job search and on those jobs, as you're breaking in and beginning to enter, follow some ancient wisdom. Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly. Don't fool around with humans. Give them what they need, look them in the eye, talk to them, and just be straight. Just be straight with yourself and with them. Be a coworker. Be the coworker you would want to have worked with. Unless, of course, you've been hired to be the hammer, and then that's a different story. But the golden rule is not a bad place to start in terms of these introductions of yourself into a new life, into a new life. 4th, 5th, and 6th and 7th, let us lump into one. Be of service when it's presented, and that's so hard to understand, especially when you need money and you're looking for work. And what that means to me is old John Bird's wisdom. Go find something, bring in some money, even if you're selling books or even if you're being, a vendor of some sort. Help somebody. And the universe will help you take care of it, because you'll be motivated, you'll be making enough money to get by. You'll just be, kind of putting the end out there further downfield. But get engaged and stay engaged. And then finally, if you're looking for work and you have a job right now, and this is hard-earned wisdom that I've seen it happen to other people. Never ever breathe a word about your transition unless you are ready to jettison the institution, because that institution will protect itself. It will act like it's been infected with something alien, and it will form white blood cells around you and extrude you. And if you've given them a date, it'll work before that date. Don't worry. My point in all of this is to be your own best advocate and get help. One of the primary things that 40 plus of Washington, D.C. did for me when I was in transition from the Senate to the State of the Presidency was there was a lawyer. Remember Patricia Jane? She's a labor lawyer there just to talk to. Helped me work out the transition language, because they were getting rid of me. We had a leadership transition and they needed to move me out. So they gave me a promotion, no raise, and said, you got a little bit of time to get out the door. Well, thanks, guys. But with Pat Jane's help, I was able to structure a better transition arrangement with a little bit of a severance, and also about another 6 months, in total 9 months of health support. Got those benefits in place. Could not have done that without 40 plus. So in any case, I'll leave it there. Humility and reserve are undervalued by much of the world, but never by leaders. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. And now I'll turn it over to Orlean.
Okay, well, thank you. Following that, learned a lot. I'm very happy to be here this evening when Barbara asked me to be on the panel and to speak to this group. I felt very fortunate to have the opportunity to come and share some of my background and where I've been. Transitions is a term I would think near and dear to my heart. I think most of my work career has been one transition to the other, with landing on certain platforms in between. I come from a background that's fairly fluid. And one thing that sticks in the back of my mind, and I have to credit my father, who was a surgeon, and he, surgeons are cut and dry. They go in, something's wrong, take it out, sew it up, throw it out, and see you a couple of times and they're gone. So he compartmentalized life to a fault, and sometimes it's a little difficult as a child when your father says, "Get over it." To kind of have that kind of comfort. One of the things my father told me is you always have to be ready for the next step, and in that search of being ready, you always have to look out for what the next thing is on the horizon and be open to it, and you have to learn to let go of wherever you are and step back. So my career has been mostly with a foundation in healthcare. I started off with a master's in community mental health psychiatric nursing, which gave me a platform for looking at systems and looking at the individual in the systems. So my approach has always been to look at what the system is about and where I am in the system and where is the system going. And can a thing like something being affected, the corpuscles are going to come around me and say it's time for you to move on, or am I with the organism and we can grow together? So that's kind of been my framework all along. My positions have been, after graduate school, basically was going into the mental health field. And so mental health started off in the nonprofit. The door opened to moving from where I was in Indiana, where I grew up and went to school, to moving to Texas, basically because the opportunity came for psychiatric nursing to be independent. So I took advantage of that independence and moved to Houston, Texas, where unfortunately the window closed as soon as I got there. But what I did have was a huge background in compliance. And being in compliance, I was able to move into hospital administration right away and take that background in systems and move into hospital administration, which was for-profit. So it was a very good transition because I came with an understanding what the individuals in that facility needed, but I also knew overall what the management systems were going to be. I was able to transition from that to a public health platform, moving from Texas to Washington, D.C., because of a networking process that I had going on. And when you're in public administration or hospital administration, you're constantly in meetings. One of the things my first director of nursing told me when I was assistant director of nursing, whatever meeting you're in, say something. Figure out something to say. And this was a time where I was not, hello, how are you? This is Orlean Grant. This is the time I would sit in the back of the room and go, who are these people? But I had this voice in the back of my mind. If you're in a room, stand up and say something. People will turn around, they will notice you, and they will remember you. And that has stuck with me at all times. When you're thinking about networking and you're trying to find other people who may be able to connect with or who could help you, one of the biggest things you can do is to say something, to speak, to pose a question, pose a statement, and say your name. And I would say that, say your name. And you have to sit and practice in front of a mirror, which I have done quite a bit throughout the years, is to say your name without tripping over it. So in the back of my mind, I had this director of nursing, and what I didn't know that she was in the room waiting for me to stand up and say something, which I'm so glad I did. And I carry that with me wherever I go, to say something, to stand up and say something, to be known, to be heard, to be understood, and also to share your knowledge. I mean, I heard a lot of statements here during the kind of, low-key networking that we were doing. A lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, a lot of skill sets. Never would know. You don't know who's in front of you, and always remember that you don't know who's in front of you. I mean, you think you see something, but you don't know. You have all this talent in this room, so you need to share it. So I was able to segue through my networking to working for a national company, doing surveys, doing assessments, doing all kinds of education. And it was because someone who knew me, who knew what I did in hospital administration, said, this is an opportunity, would you like to have it? Didn't know I was one of 5 people being interviewed in the nation for this position, and was able to secure it, which led me to Washington, D.C. And Washington, D.C. led me to being appointed to the Mayor's Commission on Mental Health through 2 mayors. Remember, one left, one came, through that kind of administration. So I went from for-profit back to non-profit to policy, public policy, which was an eye-opener. And again, flexibility in your background is one thing I always kept open. If there was an opportunity that came my way, to weigh it as to whether this door is opening and presenting a challenge. And if it was a challenge, and I'm a high-risk taker, then to move forward with that challenge. And not to go on too long, but from that platform, I was able to go back to the nonprofit world and work for the public health institutions, community health institutions. And from there, we went into the Great Depression, and I was promptly downsized with my entire department, walked out the door and created my own company in the next week. And I did that in relation to help from friends who said, at this point in your life, you have all this background, take it and incorporate it, and you create your own company, which I did, and was able to secure my first contract within 30 days. So that company is 8 years old. It's a for-profit, and 5 years ago, I created the nonprofit that I'm CEO of. It has been around for about 5 years, and it's similar but different. We're in the 50-plus space, and we are regional. We're in DC as well as Maryland, and our mission is to improve the lives of the 50-plus through education, training, and our mission is to have a world where aging is empowered. And we are in this space doing workforce development. We're doing education through roundtables, elder abuse series, and we do research and outreach in this particular area, and workforce development for the 60-plus crowd, creating space for education as well as opportunity to speak directly with employers through an annual event. The biggest thing I can say about transitions is to always understand and always be aware that one is around the corner. Even if you're in a position, such as you like your position, but you want to move to more of the educational realm for software, then that's a good possibility because you're open to that possibility. Once you close that door of looking or being aware, then you do close out a lot of possibilities. So I've always been able to keep another eye open while I was doing things to find out and also to be ready for the next step.
Thank you, Orleen. And now we'll turn it over to Dave.
Thanks, Barbara. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I'm Dave O'Neill. Thanks for inviting me, by the way. I went through a career change in, I guess, 2017 through 2019. I was assistant general counsel with Verizon, so I've been a corporate lawyer for a long time. I started there in 2001. And somewhere in the early 2000s, I discovered a passion for personal finance and investing, right? And so I was doing that, it was kind of a hobby with a friend of mine, and and my day job. And before the financial crisis, I was helping friends and family kind of get ready for that because you could see that it was coming. And that happened, and that was being able to help people with something that was really interesting to me and that I enjoyed. It was a very rewarding experience, right? And sort of at this time, my job helping the company was becoming less and less rewarding. So I started thinking about a career change. But the problem would be is I would be changing jobs and industries, and I was approaching 50, and I didn't know how easy that would be. So I kind of put it on the back burner. I did some networking. I did some informational interviews, right? But I was sort of fumbling around in the dark. I didn't know that much about the field. And then in 2015, Verizon offered buyout packages, right? And I went home and I talked with my wife about it. And it seemed like if I was going to change careers, this was probably the best time to try it, right? And so we took the plunge as a family, and I went job free for a while. The plan was to be job free for about a year. I'd been working since I was 11, so I was ready for a break. I had done night school my entire education. Electrical engineering was at night, law school was at night. So I was worn out. I needed a little time off, and so I planned on it a year, and it ended up being 18 months. And it turns out, here's a little trivia: when you're changing careers, the average amount of time off is 18 months. So it takes about 18 months to decompress from whatever career you had been doing to to what you would be doing. And during that 18 months, I was networking. I'd kind of call people and talk with people, and took some securities exams. And what else did I do? Finally, studied about the industry. And after 18 months, I started circulating some resumes and going on interviews, and found my first employer, right? And it turns out that most of the firms in the wealth management field are sales firms. And I was kind of pitched and sold my first job. I think they told me what it was that I wanted to hear, and I had done a good job of weeding these out up until then, right? But this guy, he convinced me, and I'm glad that he did. But after a couple of months, it was pretty clear. Oh, I forgot my thing. It was pretty clear that it wasn't a good fit, right? And but I had learned enough about the wealth management industry to know where the good fits would be, right? So with fiduciary, legal obligation to do what's in the best interest of the client. Fiduciary, registered investment advisory firms, fee only, registered with the SEC. And so I left my first employer, and I developed a database of fiduciary RIAs. Right, so I went online and I just searched them by zip code and added them into an Excel spreadsheet and started calling them up, right? And first I looked them up online and weeded them out, so we got it down to a manageable number and started calling these guys up and going on informational interviews. And I learned a lot on these informational interviews, and what I found is call the CEO, call the decision maker, call the guy in charge. Right, and I used a technique that turns out is new, called cold voicemailing. Cold voicemailing, right? And so this is where I would call early in the morning, hoping not to get anyone. So this is the dial up, and it's please don't answer, please don't. Oh, he answered. So this is usually 6:45 in the morning, right? And I would leave a voicemail. I have a script. Hi, this is Dave, and I can. If you see me after the meeting, you want my scripts, I can send you my scripts. So I used the script, sounded enthusiastic, built rapport on the voicemail, and told him I'd be sending a follow-up email message, right, with some information about me, resume, and so I sent it off. And this was extremely effective, like 50% hits, because you could build rapport with the voicemail, follow-up email, and there was no rejection. You didn't kind of get the rejection reflex. And they could kind of get a feel for you by hearing your voice, and then kind of stalk you online, right? And then decide whether they wanted to reach out or not. So I got a lot of informational interviews this way, and some job offers. And with what I learned in doing the cold voicemailing and informational interviewing, I added to my matrix, and it helped me kind of narrow things down. And then I used a decision matrix at the end of the process to score all of my opportunities and to eliminate bias. So decision matrix, I highly recommend them. If you want, I can send you a copy of the decision matrix that I use. It's just a spreadsheet. It's criteria down the left-hand column, weighting of the criteria right next to that column, and then each one of the opportunities is a column. It's designed to eliminate bias. And that, I found a great job. In this particular, the job that I, basically, I think it's my forever job. It's my career now. He picked up the phone. The CEO picked up the phone at 6:50 in the morning.
And is that desirable? But it presumably is desirable.
Oh, that he would pick up the phone?
Yeah.
No, I'd much rather leave a
Well,
voicemail.
the top person that you want to get through initially.
Well, no. So the interesting thing is, I found that when I would call people and get them on the phone, they're trying to figure out, who is this? Do I want to talk with them? And how do I get off the phone? Because I don't, and so I found with the voicemails, people are in control, right? They don't have that rejection response. They didn't try to get off the phone as soon as possible. They weren't trying to weed me out. They were, and they had all the power. They had the control.
So how did you get the direct phone number of the top person? That's not always so easy.
I use the internet. Or I go through the switchboard system, right? Call early in the morning before the person, and get to the top person. And I talked to many top people. They brought me into the office. Maybe sometimes some of them that made me a job offer on the spot.
So if the CEO answers at 6:15, I would say I don't want to work for him.
You say wrong number. Wrong number. When will you not be there? So it was funny too. And our CEO answered the phone. He didn't say anything. There was silence. It was click, silence. And I thought, why would there be silence on the end of the line? Like, maybe he's there waiting for me to say something. So I said, hello? And he said, hello?
And
so,
said goodbye.
it was one of those things. So we made a date to have breakfast, and he said, we're not looking for anybody, but we had such a good fit. And I think that he really was thinking about getting somebody, but just didn't, wanted an out. Kind of a blind date situation, He said he had his friend call him about 20 minutes in. So that was very effective, and so I would recommend that if you can identify the employers that you're interested in, call the decision maker and leave them a voicemail message. See me. I'll send you my scripts. I've got scripts for the voicemails that I left. Do it with a smile on your face. You're trying to build rapport in the voicemail, right? A Boolean to smile, so, and then follow up emails. I can send you those too.
Yes, I would be interested.
Absolutely.
Nobody else is doing it.
I did it this morning.
Oh, good for you.
No, there's always tomorrow.
There's always tomorrow.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. And
Thanks,
now
Dave.
we move to our esteemed colleague, John.
Well, this is tough to follow these guys. And first of all, David, I want to say you look fantastic for 50.
That's
So, well, you're doing something right. So, I've had a couple career transitions also. I started as a tax accountant for one of the major accounting firms. And then, like most people, you kind of get, there's something that gets you out, and in my case it was the recession of 90, and so I found myself having to find a job, having just been out of school only 1 year. I'm like, I get my dream job, and then all of a sudden I'm thrust into this surreal world of looking for a job. But it actually turned out to be a good thing because if you do something, the more times you do something, the better you get at it. And at Arthur Andersen, they really knew how to network. And so they actually, when they were transitioning people out, they said, your job for the next month is to find a job. And they gave you a special office, and they gave you numbers to call, and you were forced to network. And I learned really early on that really networking is the key. You're not going to find a job time efficiently by applying online. It's just not an efficient way of going about it. So I was networking with a colleague at Arthur Andersen, and she came up to me and said, John, I have what I think is the perfect job for you. And I said, okay. And it was a software development company. And I'm like, oh, geez, this is not geographically desirable. But, I said, but the job seemed really interesting. And I said, I can always move. And I took the job, and it was the best job of my life up to that point. I went in every day. I was enthusiastic about it. And I did such a good job that the owner decided to cash out. We made so much money. He said, oh, geez, this is a good time to get out. And then I'm like, oh, I'm unemployed again. And so, you can be a victim of your own success, but that's okay. Because I was able to tell stories about how I helped that company get to the point where the owner could sell out. And that's a good story to tell a new employer, right? Hey, I did a great job. Here's what I did. Help this guy make millions. Do you want to hire me? Yeah. The answer is going to be yes, right? If you make millions for somebody, they want to hire you. But at the same point, I was unemployed. I was like, geez, back to the phones. But I was able to, but I knew that I wanted to still do software development because it had become a passion for me. And so I landed with another job that I was at for 19 and a half years. And if you're at a company for 19 and a half years, you probably get a little bit comfortable. And in those 19 and a half years, all the rules seem to have changed about job search. And so when we got acquired by another company and I was, transitioned out, I was like, wow, this was a lot different. The things that I'd done the first couple of times, of course, the first couple of times I was younger and at a lower level, so that the job searches were a little bit easier. Now I had to really work a little bit, which is not bad, but it's just the way it is. And when you're later in your career, you've accomplished a lot, those transitions are going to be a little bit tougher. Just expect it. But I landed in I remember being a little bit lost this time, because it had been 19 and a half years in between jobs, and I really had just absolutely loved what I was doing. And the thing that was my big obstacle in my next transition was figuring out what I wanted to do, and I will tell you, you can't really look for your next job until you figure out what you want to do, because you're just going to be spinning your wheels and it's not going to be efficient at all. So, I talk about in the class, 40 plus class, about working through an employment funnel, and you really need to figure out and narrow down. And I love your decision matrix that you created, because that's going to make you think about all the important things, the things that are relevant for you. The one thing I would add to that is don't discount anything. And so in my case, the reason I accepted the position at 40 plus is because on my resume I had that I was a softball coach for 14 years, and I realized that taking on the executive director position at 40 plus would be a lot like being the coach of a softball team, because I had to figure out how to best utilize my team to win. And so and it was that realization that made me come to 40 plus. So don't discount anything. talk with everyone. That's my big advice. I love your cold calling, well, cold emailing, but to me, I do much better when I can talk one-on-one with somebody and I can make a real connection with that person. So play to your strengths. If your strength is leaving, I really want to know how you build that rapport with the emails and the voicemails, because that's important. That's a great skill, right? If you can build rapport, with them not even talking with you, that's fantastic. For me, though, I don't have that skill. I have to actually talk. But the more you talk with people, the more they're going to tell you things about yourself that you maybe didn't realize that other people find impressive about you. And that's an important thing, because especially if you're in a transition where it wasn't your choice, you can get into the mentality of why me, and what's wrong with me, and your self-esteem can be hurt. So talking with people and asking them the right questions, like you've known me for a while. What are some of the things that you think I do well? Don't do this. What do you think I do? I'm awful at, because that's not what you need at that point, right? So be on the positive point, and you're going to start learning some great things about yourself, and that's going to increase your confidence, and that's what's really important during. And I will second what Rob said about the career changes are much more expensive than the job changes. And so when I was, after 19 and a half years, I had accomplished a lot. My software had been written up in trade journals as being, the best in the industry. And so what more was there for me to prove? And then I was lost, didn't know what to do. So I hired a career coach, Jim Thomas, and finally one day he said, "What makes you happy?" And I said, "Well, geez, that's a pretty important thing to consider." Because what happens is, if something's going to make you happy, you're going to be enthusiastic. You don't have to fake it. You're going to be that way. And when there's a thin line between a yes and a no, the more enthusiastic person's going to be the person they're going to take. So be that enthusiastic person. Go after the jobs that you're really interested in, because then it's going to make the research easier. I'm sure when you were doing the research on the investment firms, it's a lot easier, right? Because you knew what you wanted and you just laid it out. That's the first thing. So I love your approach on that. And thank you for sharing it, because you articulated it really well for everyone. But that was what I would recommend, is just talk with everybody. Don't rule anything out, because you never know what opportunity is out there. And for me, when my career coach said, "What would make you happy?" just like Dave, I was like, well, I really want to, I said, I want to help people with their finances. He says, "Okay, well, you can do that." And I said, "Well, you don't really understand. The financial hit is going to be ginormous. From being an award-winning software creator to being a nobody, an unproven entity. You're going to take a big hit, and you're also going to have to. I had to take the same exams. I think you 6, right? Series 6. And so I had to study for those exams too. But see, when you're passionate about it, none of that really matters, because you're going to see the green light at the end of the tunnel. And that's what I want you guys all to focus on, is the green pasture. So be honest with yourself. Talk about what really is going to get me excited to wake up in the mornings, and then go for it.
Thank you very much. What I'd like to do now is I'm going to ask the panelists questions, either individually or as a group, to respond, and then we'll open it up for your questions. A very good friend of mine, Jerry Stedler, who wrote the book Don't Retire, Rewire many years ago, and she has a list of 35 drivers. And she always, many years ago, she said to me, Barbara, why don't you select your top 5? And so my number 1 is to be where the action is. And, driver could be to be creative, to, rule the world or anything. But if you look at those drivers, and once you figure out your top 5, for me at least, the lights went on. And that's what I get paid to do, to know what's happening in the field of aging so that I can bring a big enterprise into the national conversation. So that's Jerry Sedlar, Sedlar. Go into the bookstore and at the back, I actually typed up her 30 drivers. I've sent it to a number of people. And pick your top 5. It's really an eye-opener. Okay. I'd like to ask this question for everybody, and I think some of you have answered it already. What questions should you ask yourself before you make a career change? Does anybody have a response to that?
What do I love thinking about? What fascinates me? What do I really enjoy learning?
I think there's a number of things depending upon the circumstance by which you're considering this job change. It could be if it's a forced change. In my foundation, we deal with a lot of individuals, and I've been through this several times myself, where the decision is made for you. There was one time where I was very close to the hospital controller who left the budget out for the next year, and whenever I looked at it, my position was redlined out. So, whether or not you are being forced out of a position for whatever reason, it could be you made too much money and everybody's leaving, which is a good reason. Or it could be you're being downsized, or what we say you're being retired, forced retired, which happens to a lot of individuals, especially around the late 40s, early 50s, 51 is the space where you start feeling that compression, according to the studies today. So I think it depends upon the circumstances by which you are considering another position. For myself, besides that one where it was forecasted I would not have a position, I would say look at it as an opportunity by whatever way it comes towards you. And that's hard if it's not one that you anticipated or want. And sometimes you have to understand that maybe deep down inside you have wanted this transition anyway, and that step back and objectively, if you can do this, and this is very hard to do, but I found it very helpful whenever something was opening or closing, to step back and say objectively, what is presenting itself and what opportunities does it present for growth, to explore something that I may not have had the courage to explore before. Is this the opportunity that I was hesitant to reach for, and it's now presenting it to me? So I always try to step back and say, what is this bringing towards me, and can I embrace it? Because somewhere deep inside, I am prepared for this change. I am prepared for this next risk. And to look to see, I think, a lot of us have been saying that level of self-confidence within yourself, dig deep and know and start talking to yourself, or have a support team that says, you can do this, you can do that. You write it down for yourself and put it on the board. You can do this, you can do that, and know that you have the confidence to step forward.
Can I build? I'd like to build on that for 1 second. I think
Sure.
that's a wonderful point. And here's some science that so few people know. It comes from Dan Gilbert at Harvard. Our minds are evolved to be happy about how things turn out regardless of how they turn out. Okay? Regardless of how things turn out, our minds are evolved to be happy about it. So even if it's bad, even if it's terrible, Pete, you will look back on that experience and be glad that it happened. Right? It's called synthetic happiness. And this occurs at an unconscious level. Unconscious. Right? So even if something bad happens, a setback, you can take solace in the fact that you will be glad that it happened eventually. Right? And that I have used that to empower me and give me courage to kind of face those difficult situations and keep going, knowing that the setbacks, they really are, what did Bill Clinton say? A setback is a setup for a comeback? Right? Was that Bill Clinton? Yeah. So,
It should have been.
Is that going too far back? I don't know.
A little bit.
So synthetic happiness, and so there are no setbacks. There are no lasting setbacks.
Well, thank you. Can we continue this conversation? And what are some of the key factors, and this is really for everyone at the table here, in maintaining your resilience as you face doors opening, sliding closed, and what keeps you moving forward? I have to give credit to Orlean for this great question. So could we continue on that line, if anybody has a comment?
I'd like to just pick up from the earlier conversation about kind of emotional awareness, because that's, for me anyway, because I'm a knucklehead, that's actually earned. And it comes with the knowledge that out of the experience when it's no longer working. I had a job from 1984 to 1992 that I was wired for. I was put on the earth to do this job. I developed it for the institution as it was initially formed. I was the vice president for programs there. But what my real strength was organizing the teams to go into the field. Now, the 44 countries, this is like Albania, Angola, Botswana, Bolivia. These are not places you're going to visit as a tourist, okay? I mean, maybe, but you have to be a little strange. But the point is, I did just at 2:30 in the morning in November of 1992. I'm on one knee in a schoolroom in Bambo in the Central Highlands in Angola, having just witnessed some really horrific but heroic stuff where some school teachers and public servants were defending ballot boxes against the Trump thugs and lieutenants and so on. And they did it, and they did it successfully, and nobody got killed. It was just magnificent. And I was making notes for our report because we had to get this stuff back into circulation. And I was sitting there writing, and I realized I felt absolutely nothing. I was emotionally flat. I was done. I've been doing this work for about 8 years, and I was down. I was emotionally down, and it took me a long time to accommodate to the fact that the dream job was no longer really the answer for me. Plus, family stuff and so on. I had to get back into this country, and I had to be here with my kids and my wife and my cats and everything else. But the reality was that it took that kind of knowledge about where I was and when I was to drive the transition. They talked about strength. I had to accept a third of what I was making. That went over really well at home. But the point is that it is synthetic knowledge because you're looking back on it as synthetic happiness. But to carry it forward, it's giving me the opportunity to realize when I'm not responding in a way that is emotionally rational, that is correct to the circumstances, I got to start paying attention because something else is going on. And I'm a knucklehead. I have to get, it has to really hit me because I will hard charge my way through, just about everything. So that the point is, when I'm ready for change, I don't always know it until the universe talks to me and I start listening. And then I'll have the energy, I'll have the ability to turn, pull back from, shift, make transitions.
Thank you. I have a question for everybody here, and that is, when do you stop preparing, analyzing, and take action?
When did you stop analyzing?
Analysis paralysis. How do we get over that, John?
My wife told me to make up a decision. Never mind. Get to work, she said. Get back to work, And so that was the decision making for me. I can't claim any great wisdom here, but I do want to
charge of your house.
Yeah, it's true. Well, because sometimes you can, get caught up in the details and realize that no matter what you do, you can use it to propel yourself forward. And that was what my wife's point was. Really, John, no matter where you're going to go, you're going to do good things because that's where you're wired. So, don't worry about getting the perfect job. Just get back up into the batter's box, get up to bat. And so that's the important thing to do. And it's really mind over matter. Synthetic happiness, it's whatever. But for me, and I want to just address some of the questions that Barbara asked. Some of the questions I asked myself, what do I love doing and why? And it was, again, that softball question and the coaching and using people to really win and do great things. That is a very big motivator for me that I realized. So ask yourself, what do I love doing and why? And then the other question I ask myself is, what's holding me back? Because we all have these little fears, and if we don't address them, then they're going to overtake us. And so go ahead and address your fears. What's holding me back? And talk it out with your friends and your former coworkers, your former bosses. And it's going to help you overcome these, internal hurdles that you put up on yourself. Now, what keeps me going forward? I think what keeps me going forward is knowing that no matter where I go, I can make a difference. And I love a challenge. So if I see a situation that really isn't optimal, and nobody else really wants to do it because it's either too hard or they're afraid that they're not going to succeed, then that's something that's really enticing for me. So I like to challenge myself. That's what keeps me going. The big challenge.
I think part of it is also, and I think we've talked about it several different ways, is what makes you happy, what's your passion, what are your goals. But I think for all my transition is, can I make a difference in what do I bring to the table for this particular position? So in transitioning, looking at all your preparation, and again, I think taking self-inventory is a good step. Many times I've just sat down with a piece of paper, and it's just, it's kind of like dating. You have pros and cons. And is this guy worth it? Maybe he is. But you have the pros and cons of, okay, what is this? What are the possibilities here? What do I bring to the table? What's the unknown? And also look to see if you have some level of excitement, some level of intriguement with wherever you're progressing forward. Sometimes it may be to another position. Sometimes it may be to self-employment. Maybe you take all your skills and you look at generating your own income, your own paycheck, and having control of what you do to a bit more versus going into another position. So that's another transition that a lot of people, 40 plus, 50 plus, 60 plus, are looking at with all the skill sets that you have. Do you have the passion? And you talk about pay cuts, it is severe. But the wherewithal and the resources you know, a lot of what I'm hearing here is people had family support. They had maybe a buyout for the position going into my first company. I had a buyout of 6 months. It was a cushion where I could sit down and think and then create something going forward. And that is something you really want to take advantage of. I would encourage when you're making that transition, if you can stop and be still and, you know, look for your passion, look for the intrigue, look for you making a difference in the TikTok. So that's what I would suggest.
Oh, wow. My apologies, it must be God calling me.
You should answer that.
You have a special ringtone?
Or not.
It was
Someone's
a,
leaving a cold voicemail.
That's right. That's right.
At night.
That was a sign.
It was the Almighty.
Can I get his number?
Okay, we've been talking about networking, but I wonder if we could continue that conversation just for a little bit. And how important is networking and making connections?
It's
Everything.
It's everything.
Yeah,
If you're not networking, you're not working.
Yeah, it's again. There's so much you learn from networking, and today I had the pleasure of going out with Gerald, the chair of our board, to meet a gentleman that she got the appointment, informational interview by cold calling, and it was such an enlightening experience. You know, the hour, the guy had so much to share with us, and it was really wonderful. And that wouldn't have been possible without Gerald picking up the phone and saying, you know, I'm at this group called 40 Plus, and you know, I'd really like to get to know you. And it was that simple. He said yes. So she was there. A great experience, right? We had a great time. And you're not going to have, everybody is, you know, they're hesitant to make that call, but then you see what can happen. You never know. In sales, you're taught you never know what opportunity is lying behind that next call. And so it could change your life forever. And so, yeah, if you're not networking, you're not really serious about your job search, or at least finding a job anytime soon.
I do a half-hour presentation on how Washington works, and it's laid out with graphs and charts, and it's a great barrier reef of an ecosystem and so on, based on the federal government extruding resources, and then all the animals and everybody floating in it. But the issue is that this town is set up for networking. It is so beautifully positioned, given the functionality that exists across institutions. If you look at anything here, you look at anything, if you look at the AFL-CIO or you look at the Red Cross, what you're going to see is a replica of the federal government, okay? There'll be congressional relations, there'll be their networks that go back out into their districts, there'll be the entire set of service criteria that they do for their membership, they'll do their fundraising, and they'll do their legal stuff and their defense. I mean, look at it, just look at it, think about it for a second. So if you've got kind of similar activities among similar institutions, now some of them are like capstone predators in the ecosystem, like the AARP or the NRA. Mess with them and they'll come after you in your congressional district, okay? It's just that easy. But then there are the bottom feeders, all of our nonprofits, all of our, you know, little nice think tanks and all of that stuff. And then the mid-levels, the law firms and the accountants and, you know, everybody. Right. Point is, each one of these has connective tissue through issues. So if you know your issue, if it's the knowledge industry, if it's culture and education, whatever it is, start looking very carefully at the structure of this thing and where are the 16 largest employers in your field, or the 20, whatever, whoever they are. Who are the people that work on your specific issue? So what is your specific issue? Pulling out of the air, abortion rights, I don't care, indigent, aging, you name it, and you're going to look where
Immigration.
immigration. Look right across this entire ecosystem, and what you're going to see are world-class experts in these organizations that know each other and that are hiring managers. Hell, they've all held the same job at some point in the executive branch, on the congressional committees, on the newspapers, in the law firms, out in the think tanks. And they're moving like this on a regular. Identify 10 of those, talk to them. You're going to know where the money's going, who's up, who's down, what's next in terms of that specific sector. And you're going to begin to develop the context that John's talking about. People who know where 80% of the job market actually is. They nailed it. The job market is hidden. So if you devote 80% of your job search time, according to the 40-plus doctrine, you're going to be saving yourself an enormous efficiency. Yeah, spend 20%, pinging at the stuff that's out on the internet. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, fine. Do the real work, the real concentrated work in that connective tissue where you can get in front of someone and talk to them in their office. Oh my God.
We were in.
Now, did these people have money?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just also want to point out, I chair the American Society on Aging Greater Washington, D.C. Roundtable. CBS supports it. It's opportunities to learn and network. And we meet on a kind of a quarterly basis. We've covered topics like tapping mature talent, women in poverty, LGBT, caregiving, the political landscape. It's really a learning and networking. It's free, and there's a little breakfast. It's usually on a Tuesday morning, 9 to 11, and it's a great opportunity. The next roundtable is going to be on voting barriers that the African American and Hispanic population of older Americans encounter. And we're going to have some really high-level presenters. Orlean has been at several of the roundtables and in fact has presented on one of them. And we get about, 80 people. We meet at the NCBA, the National Caucus and Center on Black Aged Housing Project in Columbia Heights. They have a wonderful, wonderful community room. There's a little breakfast, and but it's networking. We have a panel, and then it's strictly, learning and networking. It's free, and it's really, I think it's really, I'm a great proponent of networking, and I remember a number of years ago, I used to see everybody looking at the internet for jobs. And there used to be a woman, I don't know if she's still around, Margaret Riley, who wrote the book Searching the Internet for Jobs. And I once called her and I said, well, Miss Riley, I don't, everybody's looking at the internet, and I have some training in epidemiology, and I just don't see where I fit into any of this. And here's what she said to me. She said, Barbara, I'm quoting her, Barbara, honey, what you need to do is look at organizations, see what the mission statement is, see who's on the board, see what the priorities are, and
Angle your way in.
exactly, start networking, and you just don't know who can make that connection for you. And so if you're not networking, and it's not comfortable, there's networking for introverts. Go on the internet, there's something. I remember once, just checking that out.
Well, I would also say there's different levels of networking, and there's different mediums of networking. And one of the things we're finding out, especially for those people who used to have a social network or don't have a social network, or their social network that they had is not the industry or where they want to go. One of the avenues you can also utilize is looking at your social media as a way to reposition you. Once you figure out what your passion is, where you want to go, how you want to position yourself as who you are now. Because of what I've been hearing from many of you, you used to do this, but now you want to do this. You want to move from this area, but now you want to be in this area. Another way you can do it is to pinpoint those organizations through something such as LinkedIn, where you can find people and connect with people. It's almost like cold emailing, because you can connect very easily to people who are in different industries, different positions, and you will find a CEO. And you can link into some of these people. I have met a number of different people in different industries through LinkedIn profile, which starts conversations, which then you can pick up the phone and email them or meet with them. So that's another way, if you're a little hesitant about going to organizations or going to meetings, that's another level of repositioning yourself, because one of the things that a lot of employers will do is go and look at your social media to see what you've done, what kind of profile you have, and what are some of the things you can do. So all your points of success is where you can list those and people can understand your strengths and who you are now. And that is kind of like a forerunner of what you can say to individuals.
Also, if you're involved in a faith-based organization, by all means, let everybody know you're, looking, for new opportunities. You're not looking for a job, you're looking for new opportunities. And I mean, there's so much conversation going on in faith-based groups.
Barbara, can I ask the audience, is there anyone here who's hesitant to network or doesn't know how to get started in network? Because that's something, because it's so important, I think it's important for us to I said earlier, one of the questions I asked myself was, what's holding me back? And now I want to ask you guys, if you're not networking, what's holding you back? Does anyone have a fear or something that they want us to discuss pertaining to getting started and actually, picking up the phone or taking whatever action you need to start networking?
Karen?
Yes. Excuse me. I am unsure where I should be networking, given my particular interests. Now, I think you know, because I emailed you and I know my classmates know, all of a sudden I was seeing a lot of articles come out in the paper about the Planet Word Museum, which is going to open in May. It hasn't opened yet. And I wanted to write to the founder. And, I found her on LinkedIn and I could have connected that way, but I wanted her real email address. And I put it out to my synagogue, and there was one person in the synagogue who was a close friend of this woman and who contacted the woman and said, can I give this person your email address? So, you see, that was like a green light to me. Then I could see the way forward. I was a little hesitant just to send out a LinkedIn message to her. I mean, I just wonder if people really respond to that kind of thing. If they don't know the person.
First of all, you did the right thing.
Well,
you reached out to your network.
yes.
You found somebody, and that person was probably able to tell you one or two things that would help you have a good conversation. And if not, that's one of the questions you should ask.
I mean, what I did was then I read these articles about the museum, which gave background about this woman, why she wanted to start the museum, what her concept of the museum was. So I wrote a kind of job application email without there being a job, but just based on what I discovered about her and about the museum. Now, it turns out that it wasn't a good fit because they have no objects in their collection. The Planet Word Museum, it's just neon and electronics. And I even put a question in my email about I would be so interested to know what word pictures you would present for this word and that word. And she said, well, all of our words were sent to our designer in New York months ago because they had to create the electronics for it. So what she ended up saying was, but perhaps I can contact our program director who may be looking for people to do, educational program work. So the question I asked you, John, was, should I wait and see if she does connect me with this, manager in her up-and-coming museum, or should I try and figure out who that is and directly approach that person? Part of it is I'm not sure how aggressive to be. And as I said, it's hard for me to figure out the arena in which to make a noise. Here, it was like someone was talking to me because I saw the articles in the paper, and suddenly I realized this might be an opportunity.
Can I just help you out here for
Please.
a second? Because, what you're doing is you're telling us three things. You're telling us that you were given a gift of all the search terms that you need to locate other entities that have similar functions and similar capacities where you might fit. So
the search terms would be
the name of the museum, the type of things they're doing, the arena in which they're working, the location, the zip code, et cetera, et cetera. Well, let me back up a second. I may be speaking a little bit of Greek here.
you just mean museums.
Just museums. No, but not just museums. You
Yeah.
need a little more information and you need a little more tactile. That's what you're telling us. So it's it may be not the whole suite of museums, but a certain type of museum. There is a publication, and I was going to bring a copy because I always bring them and give them away. It's called the Washington Information Directory. Has anybody ever heard of this? And it is, yeah, exactly. I'm giving you one. and it comes out. It's produced by the Congressional Quarterly, and it costs about $400 if you buy the current year. Don't buy the current year. Go on Amazon and buy last year's for $2.47 plus shipping. But it's the same darn thing. It's all 20,000 entities in the metropolitan area, and it lays them out by theme. It lays them out by content. It lays them out by board of directors. It lays it out by telephone numbers. It lays it out with a way to get at it.
So what would I look up?
You would look up, you would do your search on those things that interested you in terms of presentation of culture and knowledge. You would look at institutions that are preserved, for example, the National Endowment for Humanities and all their grantees. You would look up the National Endowment for the Arts and all their grantees. You got a shopping list right there. You would go on the USAID website under the yellow, they have a yellow book that they publish all the grants they give to people in different parts of the world, and look and do theme search on those activity areas and targets that you've just identified for us here. So it's because what you want is more than just one museum to networking. You did a magnificent job of networking into the leadership on that because you got her targeted. You got her 5 by 5. You know exactly where she is.
Yeah.
You can drop right on that. Perfect. You need to do that for 6 or 7 of these entities. Sorry.
Okay, can we just go on to some other, excuse me, can we just go on to
Sorry.
other people who have questions? And if you could give us your name again and pose the question for the panel.
I don't have a question. My name's Terrence, but I was just listening to everybody.
Oh, does anybody else have a question? Yes, Tom.
Hi.
Hi there, Tom
Hi.
Goodwin.
Hi. I actually, well, it's a kind of a question, but also some information, and primarily addressed to Dave. I'm glad you rediscovered the telephone. I was a headhunter, recruiter in San Francisco and Silicon Valley in the early 80s. okay? 10, 15 years before the internet. The telephone was how I did my job. And I did exactly what you have discovered is effective. I would read messages to hiring managers on the off hours, and I would present candidates. Of course, I would have done research. And you know where I did the research? At a place called the San Francisco Business Library, okay? There was no internet. I mean, you had to go out and find stuff and present people, leave a voicemail with a, what we call a teammate, tell me about yourself, but a synopsis of the person, and with the, to whet the appetite of the manager so that when I called back on a prescribed time and date, that person would be interested in talking to me. I would then try to schedule an interview without a resume, because again, what did you have? Mail. There was no email. So the telephone. What I'm just trying to prove is your comment that the telephone is a very, very effective way of networking, to get the word out, to prepare people for who you are out there. And then when you do get into the conversation with a person, if it's not a go, the question you always ask in every conversation you have, who else should I talk to? Okay? Put that down as the main question, because that's how you build your network, And people generally, I learned back in those days, in the early 80s, people are willing to help you. They really want the best, So if you're developing relationships, you're working with people, but you're having to do the research. You're having to figure out why you're calling individuals, what it is you're presenting, how are you going to solve their pain? What are you going to do to help them be successful? And that's how you have to, in your head, think that the reason you're making the call is for that positive effect. I mean, if somebody says, I don't have time to talk to you or whatever, don't take that as a negative. That person has missed an opportunity to find out something about how, you can offer something successful to help them in their operation. So you have to be very positive about the whole process. So I'm glad you brought up the telephone, because it made me go back and think of, how I earned my money, and it was with the telephone.
Did you say your name was? Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Also, if, for example, you wanted me to introduce you to somebody out there, I would, and to do it by way of email, I would ask you to give me 2 or 3 points about yourself that you want me to highlight or showcase. So I don't have to think about it, and then I would, by way of the email, introduce you. It's the same thing if I wanted someone to write a reference for me, I would make sure that I was giving them 2 or 3 bullet points that I wanted them to promote. So there are just so many ways of networking these days. And you've got the holiday season coming up. Hi, how are you doing? Have a happy blah, 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 blah. And or happy birthday or whatever. It's really quite, so even if you're hesitant about the face-to-face kind of networking, through the email, it's...
Another possibility that's rather soft is going to conferences. Roundtables, my organization provides roundtables as well. It's a great way to walk in, and people are really eager to meet you. But if you're in the museum industry, there's got to be a conference going on in this area. This is one of the best areas to find a conference on anything, or a meeting on anything, or a press release on something. But look at the think tank organizations such as Brookings Institution. A great array of subject matters.
The Chamber of Commerce is fantastic.
Organizations, yeah. Wherever your industry or wherever subject matter you want to go, I would look for the educational, the social opportunities within that. If there's a conference and they have a cocktail hour, it's a great way to go and socialize with people in a very soft setting.
or volunteer if you don't want to put up the dollars, or go through the proposal listings and you see something that's of interest, send the presenter a note telling them, you know, great article on reframing ageism or whatever.
Let me just throw in one more thing. I work in grants. So
Yeah, and I saw
grant.
you're at an
Exactly.
educational institution.
We have a grant. It's only $500,000 over 18 months from the Institute for Museum and Library Science. It's part of the federal government.
Yes.
It's right here in town. They sponsor conferences and seminars and meetings and outings and whatever it is they do on a regular basis. So they'll have a list of awardees. You can go in and see who's got the money, see where the money is, see what the jobs are.
They are a grant-making organization.
They
is
are,
what you're
yes,
saying.
they're part of the federal government. Yes.
I'm also a shopper. And I find, no, I'm very serious, and I find part of the reason I like it is that I can often engage people, whether it's the manager of X shop or another customer. And you'd be surprised often where the conversation leads to. Maybe particularly in the Washington, D.C. area.
I think we have a question.
Yes. Could you tell us who you are again?
Yeah, Angela. I work. Sorry, I have a question about networking and then jobs in the federal government. How would you approach that? Because I know there's like this official website, and do most people apply through that, or would you also have to pinpoint people that already are inside that office? Like how?
My limited experience dictates that yes, all of the above, you do everything you can to get around the HR screen. The network can be, people get to know people, but in order to get in, to get for the interviews, you've got to be, you got to apply.
USA jobs.
Exactly. There you go.
that's the one.
And you got to be qualified, and you've got to do a really clean, crisp job on every aspect of the application, because they're looking at thousands and thousands. And getting into the reject pile is the easiest thing in the world, so you got to keep it really clean. You got to make sure your work status is in good order, so that you don't have any, disqualifications there. But getting in and meeting people is key, and really this town is just set up for that. Look how many the think tank suggestion is brilliant, because where do those feds go to kind of find out what's going on? They go to the U.S. Institute of Peace, they go to the Cato Institute, Brookings, Heritage, CSIS, all the New Americas foundations. They can't even keep track of this.
I mean, another thing, if you were interested in aging, the federal government, the Administration for Community Living, try to get in to see Lance Robertson or Edwin Walker, who are the two top people there, and just have a conversation, and they can give you a clue about what's coming down the pike or who else to talk to.
There's a couple of things.
I mean, I know them there because that's what I live and breathe nonstop.
For the feds, there's a couple of things you want to look at. One, you want to look at their forecast. You want to look and see what their major goals are going to be to see if you fit into that. You also want to look to see if there's any blog, or if they have, look at their Twitter to see what their buzzwords are, because when you do your resume, you want to match the language that they're speaking at the moment, not what was happening 10 years ago. So you want to look to see what the latest issues are that they're trying, and what you can do to help them move the needle forward. It's solution-based. The other thing I would suggest, they have industry days, which are open. They don't cost anything. You may not get the top person there, but you will get staff. And staff will tell you what's coming open, and they will tell you what's not happening, or the real story. So again, I think Barbara's idea, if you compliment somebody on an earring, they'll just open up to you and say, I do it all the time, and go in, God, who did your nails?
It's really amazing.
They just lean back and go, oh, okay, we got something in common. So as much as you can do your homework when you do fill out that resume, because people will be scrutinizing for buzzwords that match where the agency is going.
Or if you live in a community where you vote, go see your congressional person or someone at the state level. They know tons of people, and as a constituent, it might take you somewhere.
I was a very lazy networker. That's a confession, right? I was a very lazy. I went right to the top. And the way that I did that is I asked myself, what's in it for them? What's in it for them?
Right.
Why do they want to talk to me? Right? I'm not going to reach out to them and say, hey, I need you to help me. Right? I didn't reach out to them. What I did is I reached out to them and I said, hey, I was wondering if these resources that are available to me would interest you and would help you in your organization. Here's what I might be able to do for you. Are you interested in having a conversation? Make it about them. And science shows what's the number one way of being more likable. Does anybody know this? It's research out of Princeton. Anybody? Come on.
Talk about the other person.
Yeah.
No.
Compliment the other person,
No.
ask them personal questions.
No.
In agreement.
Up close.
Ask them personal questions, like what's your favorite cake?
Follow-up questions.
Oh.
Follow-up questions. Lights their brain up like a Christmas tree. Right? They make a comment and you ask them another question about that. The golden number of follow-up questions is 2 to 3. And they will find you, if you ask them follow-up questions, you'll become the most interesting person they've met that week. Right? Follow-up questions. So what's in it for them? If you can answer that question, what's in it for them when you reach out to them, they will respond to you. Right? They will open their resources to you and ask them follow-up questions. Right? That is the 1-2 punch that is irresistible. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, the myriad of networking possibilities are infinite, right? And the number of blind alleys is infinite. I can't keep all that stuff. I'm too lazy for that. There's too much Netflix to watch, right? So what's in it for them? Make it about them and follow-up questions.
Do we have another question? We have, wait a minute, we're about 3 minutes before 9. So we're about, and
Is this the pumpkin hour?
whatever.
Ron?
Oh, we turn into.
Maybe we could take one more question from someone who hasn't asked. Is there another question? Well, then why don't we wrap up, and thank you so much for joining us, and let's thank our panelists.